Morning. We are in Memvav Amud Beis 46b. So I just want to share some feedback. Rabbi Gimple sent me an email and something to think about. We were discussing the meaning of the chata sa'oif, the bird offering that's also nipped from the back of the neck, all right, with a nail, and comparing that to the egla rufa, which is also from the back of the head, and the hidden message in there, or the Hasidic message in there that we're referencing klipa, it's from the back, and what that might mean in context of the chata sa'oif, and we suggested that that's indicates a complete elevation of even the backside, as opposed to Egla Rufa, which is the discard of the backside, so to speak. So Rabbi Gimple noted, and this is true, if we were to do this properly, we would have to really look at the Hasidic sources on the Chata Sa'if itself, because at the moment what we're doing is we're taking what we learned about Egla Rufa and Paraduma and applying it to other things, which is good in and of itself in the context of what we're doing here. But if the subject at hand would be the mitzvah of Chata Sa'if, we have to look at what's said there and specifically see how that's applied to all the various different cases in which the Chata Sa'if is brought. It's not as if, like the Egla Rufa is brought in one circumstance, Paraduma is in one circumstance, atoning for death, for contact with death, right? But the Chata Sa'if, the bird, is brought in many different circumstances. Sometimes it's required, sometimes it's only because someone's poor, sometimes for impurity, sometimes for, so it's not as clean as say the Egla Rufa and the Paraduma. So if that were the subject of our discussion, we'd have to really delve into the various different types of Chata Sa'if, when they're brought, why they're brought, and see if we can apply this concept to all those various different circumstances. So that's something that should be noted. Right. But like in the broad sense, and in the sense that our Gemara does not distinguish between one type of bird offering and another, just lumps them all together and just does them as a comparison to Egla Rufa in regard to the back, I think what we offered is enough, suffices in that context. But if we're to zoom in to the bird offering itself, we have to offer more in terms of applying it to all the various different ways in which that offering is offered. So I thought I would share that.
But it's still all of them, no matter what it's for, they're all nipped from the back.
Right, they all have this.
So that's really
that's why I'm saying, which is the relevance to us.
Right.
If we were zooming in to learn about the laws of the bird offering, we have to go through explaining how the back makes sense in context of each of the various different times that this bird is offered. But the Gemara doesn't do that here. The Gemara just says broadly, all the bird offering is the back. We derive from there that the decapitation is also from the back on the Egla Rufa.
I think zooming in would be more relevant if some of them were in the front and some were in the back, or some were
I see.
Shita,
right.
But since they were all from the back,
I don't
think you need to zoom in on that.
No, you're right. But what I mean is in the sense that
right.
Do each of the circumstances in which the bird is offered represent what I'm suggesting, that this is a transformation of even the absolute negative. So we have to see how that would play into the various different times that this is offered. Okay. Right? Like for example, he talks about if a person is poor and he brings a bird offering. You can think how that might play in. As a poor person spiritually, as the Gemara says it actually, ain't on the elevadas. Someone who's poor is truly poor, is true poverty is in the mind, not in wealth. Mm-hmm. So a poor person is a person deficient in all Torah mitzvahs. So what does he have to offer? So for him, who's coming from a complete wasteland, his offering is to elevate even his most negative space, right? That we talked about yesterday, the Shuvah, where a person feels so distant, and the distance itself is fuel for going closer. That's the poor man's offering. The poor man, he feels very distant, so he elevates even that space. I'm saying we can zoom into each of the cases in which this bird offering is offered and see how this idea applies there. But we have to do that if that was a subject of our learning. It's not, and the Gemara just uses it, like you said, broadly. Bird from the backside,
right?
And we derive from there that the Egla is also from the backside. But yes, if that were the subject, we have to zoom in to see how it applies. Sorry?
Right. No, it's also an interesting subject to look at all different types of the bird offerings.
That's right.
Being
for the Zava, for the one who gives birth, for the this, for the that.
A sin offering.
That's correct. There's the burnt and there's the sin. What the difference between the two is why one's above, one's below. We have to get
squeezed or
sprinkled. Right. We have to go through all of that. Yeah, that's correct. But it's not the subject at hand. So, but it's still worthy of note. Sure. And just also the public acknowledged by Gimple for sharing his feedback, which is certainly valued and appreciated, as well as the Mesiras Nefesh to be here. And still mind blown. I was actually thinking to myself, is he going to be here? He's not going to be here. He's here. Yeah, much appreciated. All right, so we are Mavav Medbeis, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines from the top of the page, beginning of the line. Oh, sorry, 6 lines from the top of the page, last word. So the Mishnah describing and outlining the rite, the ritual of Eglah Rufa, and then the Gemara, which elaborates on that, gets to the next step. After describing the corpse, where the corpse is found, who comes out to measure, what else did we describe? We described the nature of the animal, that it was never worked, what that means, and now we discussed the decapitation. That was the most recent thing. Well, the fact that the river is raging, strong river, and now that then the decapitation. Now the next step is the area has never been worked and never will be worked, which is what the Mishnah said. The Mishnah said like this: and the place of the Eglah Rufa, the place of the ritual, Asr Melizraya, it is forbidden to sow, and to do any work. That's the Mishnah. As has been the pattern, the Gemara introduces a Mishnaic text which elaborates on the Mishnah's ruling. So, before we get to that, I want to read from the pasuk itself, which yesterday we didn't look it up, or we didn't have it down as to which pasuk it is. I remember that it was chapter 21, and I was right about that, but it wasn't in Midbar, was in Devarim. So it's Devarim 21, and it is verse 4. Yeah, you can get one, so you can go read along, because the precise language here is very important. Actually, the pronunciation.
No, it's not.
Devarim, yes, Devarim. Devarim 21. So it's verse 4. Look at the Hebrew best. If you can see the Nakudas, if you can see the pronunciation, it's very important. So v'haridu ziknei ha'ir hahi, the elders of that city shall bring down esa eglah, the calf, el nachal eson, to the strong river. Asher, now here's the words. 2 statements. Asher loy ye aved, that which, hard to translate this word because the Gemara itself is going to struggle, but I'm going to try my best. Here they said, which was neither tilled nor sown. That's how they write it. But they are translating based on the Gemara's conclusion. If you were to translate literally, and you wanted to say that was not worked, past tense, you would say asher loy avad, ba, that was not worked with it. But you're saying asher loy ye aved. So it's a little bit ambiguous. Asher, that word asher, that, implies we're talking about something that already was. That which wasn't worked. As opposed to a command, and you shall not work. Right? So that word asher implies that's in a past tense. But ye aved, the ye at the beginning especially, implies a future. Or actually, you would say, sorry?
No.
Here.
Hard.
It's hard to properly translate this. Well, because of the...
No, because I'm just not...
familiar enough with modern Hebrew, with the biblical Hebrew, yes. And to be honest, Tiktok is not my strong suit either. So I'm trying to work with this also. So Asher, let's just do it this way. That was not worked. That would be past tense. What if I said that which was not work without the ed at the end?
That which was not work.
Mm-hmm.
It's also past tense.
Because I said the word that which was.
Was.
Right? Let's do it more literally. That not work. That not
sentence.
It's a funny sentence. And that's kind of what the translation is.
Oh.
Right?
Not work.
That not work. Asher means that. Loy not. Ye aved.
That's
Ye aved is actually active. but not in the past nor in the future per se. It's like in a present tense.
Is it work or worked?
But worked in English can imply past
Tense.
tense, but it could also imply present tense. That which not working, maybe. It's hard to get it in English. Because Yeyoved almost sounds like it's being worked now,
like
presently.
Present participle.
A present action. How would you say that?
Well, you said working before.
Okay, that which isn't walking.
That which isn't walking?
Yeah, in English. What would that mean? Past tense or present tense? It's a present tense.
It's present.
It's a present tense, right? And that's kind of what it's saying here. That's kind of the way it's saying here. But but working. But working, land itself doesn't work. So it's being worked on. That which is not being worked. Maybe that's a better translation. That which is not being worked.
Not being worked.
Yeah.
That could be present or past.
That's right. That's the Gemara's question. That's right. And more than that, the yay, which is a present tense, and a continuous present tense, can also be future. The yud at the beginning.
So you have past, present, and future happening here?
Precisely. Making it very difficult to properly translate. Hence the Gemara's discussion currently.
Okay. Thank you.
Now that we see the confusion, let's see how the Gemara deals with it. Tanan Rabbanon. The pasuk says, "Asher loy ye'aved," that which is, how do we translate it? That which is not being worked, boy in it. Right?
That's a limiter.
It's a limiter. V'lo yizra. Wait, no, sorry. The pronunciation is v'lo yizareya, and shall not be sown. Well, the shall is not really in there. V'lo yizareya, and not being sown. Yeah. So how do I translate that? As future, as past? Is it a description of the place, or is it a command of what not to do? Is it a description of the place or command of what not to do? And that is not being worked. Is that a command or is that a description? If it's a description, it's past. If it's a command, it's future. So Lisha'avar, Divi Rabbi Yoshia. Rabbi Yoshia says that's a description of what is, and therefore it's past tense, and primarily relying on the fact that it says asher, as we'll see in a minute. That, when you say that which, you're describing it. And if you're describing it, you're giving it a past. You're talking about its past. Right? But Rabbi Nosson says the word ye'aved, without the word asher before, that which, if you just said the word ye'aved, it would be not being worked. That is a present and future tense description. Like that which isn't walking is both present and future. So that which isn't being worked, take out the word that, it's definitely a future description. And this is Rabbi Nosson's view. So Rabbi Nosson understands this as a description of of the future, don't work, and Rabbi Yosef describes it as a description of the past, that which hasn't been worked.
How could you take out the word that?
Okay, we're going to get there. We'll get there. So I'm a little bit foreshadowing because otherwise it's difficult to understand
okay.
What the meaning is, which is what Rashi does. Rashi foreshadows in his commentary, because otherwise it's unlegible. Right, Rashi right away tells us what the Gemara is about to tell us. So let's see how the Gemara plays out. What I just explained, that Rabbi Yoshia is highlighting the word asher, that, or that which, and if it's that which, it's a description. And Rabbi Yonasson's highlighting the word ye'aved, which is an active, present, and futuristic description, and therefore it's a command of what not to do in the future. So it says like this: Rava Amar. Now, here's the other thing. Sorry, we're back in the Gemara, yes. Yeah, you see the Gemara? Should we read it again? Tan Rabbanon.
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah, Tan Rabbanon, our sages taught, Asher lo ye'aved boy v'lo yizareya, that which is not worked on, and that which v'lo and not sown. L'sha'avar is a past description of the past, because it says that which. That's Rabbi Yoshi's words. Rabbi Nosson says lahaba, it's a futuristic description, considering that it describes an active working, which is both present and future. So that's the end of the Mishnah text. Comes Rava and adds the following. Rava says, Lahaba, the fact that it's a futuristic description, the kula amolai pligi, everybody agrees. Meaning, when Rabbi Yoshia highlights the word asher, that which, and as a result, therefore, understands it as a description of what was, that's not to negate the fact that it also instructs you what not to do in the future. He's not arguing that. He's saying it's also past. Correct. It's also past. Why must I conclude that? Because the pasuk says v'lo yizareya, and the word v'lo yizareya on its own means and shall not be sown. It only would be turned into past tense if I added the word asher from before, right? So let's make it clear. Let's just divide the verse into three things. It says asher, that which puts it past tense. Lo yu'ubad, lo ye'ovid is not working. Okay, that's ambiguous. On its own, it could be futuristic, but because it's attached to that which, it becomes past.
Or even present. No?
Or present. Then the next statement is v'lo yizareya, and shall not be sown. That and shall not be sown is definitely future, unless you happen to also attach it to the word asher, that which goes to both. That which is not worked and that which is not sown.
B is the word to make it futuristic, right?
Correct. We'll see. Asher, that
Where does
which.
that come from? B. That's a key word.
What do you mean B?
In English, it's the verb be, to be.
Oh.
So that's where I'm seeing the
okay, so the
component. I want to know
it's difficult in English, in Hebrew, because in Hebrew it's a prefix with the vowel, the prefix. It's the letter yud. It's the letter yud.
What's the letter yud?
And then what vowels you put under it.
Okay.
As well as what vowels you put under the word sow. Okay. Turning it from sow to sown to sowing. Right?
If you say be sown, then
right, but
sown is
that would be in English. But that's in English. So the yay, the yud with the tzedeh under it could be that.
Okay. That's what I wanted to know.
Right. So the Rava says, isolate the word v'lo yizareya, right? Because the pasuk says two things: no work and no not sown. Says Rava, isolate the words and shall not and not sown. Take that away from the asher, which comes before the not working. The word that which precedes the word not working.
Yeah. Is a discrete unit of itself.
It's correct, and therefore it's a description of the future. Don't work.
The future.
Yes, and that not sown.
I thought that which was past.
That's before, right? So yeah, that's three statements.
A
is that which. B is not work. C is not sown. Is the word that which introduction to both of these, and both of these therefore are linked to the word that which, making them both past?
No, that's what Rob was saying.
That's what I was saying. That which is only to the number two, that which is not worked. But and not sown is a new statement, which for sure is the future. And therefore Rabbi says, even Rabbi Yoshia, which took the word that which, asher, and made it past tense, it's not to negate the prohibition of working in the future, because statement 3, shall not be sown, is futuristic.
Right.
Detaching it from that which comes before the no work.
Detach it from the rest of the verse.
Because there's the word the vav there, the and. The word and can be an attachment or a detachment. Right? It could be that which is not sown and worked.
I think
and if you put it that way, it would be both of them a link to the that which, or you could say that which is not worked and shall not be sown.
Yeah, I think this is a big contention in the Gemara.
Very often about the vav, connect vav achibur or vav mafsik. Is it a vav that connects or a vav that separates? Correct. So Rav is telling us, make it a vav that separates, and therefore that which not working, there's where the discussion is it future or past. But the v'lo yizareya and shall not be sown, that's definitely future, even according to Rabbi Yoshia. So therefore, everybody agrees there's a prohibition against working in the future on that spot. That's what I was saying.
But is sown and work, are we combining them as the same meaning here?
Very good question, and the answer would be yes. Generally speaking, as the Gemara will explain in the next moment. Okay, that's going to be the next discussion. Okay. Is it a kalam prat? We're going to have that similar discussion. Why the redundancy?
Why the two different words for the same meaning?
Correct. Especially since one is a klal, one's a prat.
Right.
Don't work is a klal, unqualified general statement, don't work.
Right.
And zera, don't sow is a prat, specific. So we're going to get to that.
Past tense,
okay, we're going to get there. We'll get there. let's get there. But you're correct, and the Gemara is going to get to that in a minute. Okay, so therefore continues Rabbi, keep ligi. Where is the dispute? L'sha'avar about the past. So everybody agrees that there's a prohibition to work in the future. The question is, because the pasuk says "and shall not be sown," and that's a futuristic statement, definitely. Where is the dispute about the first statement, which is not work? Is that not work to be tied up in the word that which, and therefore it's only past tense, and therefore in addition to the prohibition not to work in the future, it must be a spot that never was work, never had work done with it. Or is the lo yu'ubad also a futuristic statement? How you detach it from the word asher? We'll get to that in a minute. Okay, so if Rabbi continues, Rabbi Yeshua is of the view, miksiv, does it say the lo yavod, and you shall not work? It says asher lo yavod, that which wasn't worked, and the word that which makes it past tense. This is what I was foreshadowing to the statement from Rabbi. But Rabbi Yonasan says miksiv asher lo nevad. Does it say that which was not worked with a nun as the prefix of the word work? That would definitely be worked in past tense. It says ye aved, and the word ye, the prefix of yud, with its tzedeh, as I mentioned before, is present / future, like walking. Had it meant past tense, it would put a nun in there, which is that which was not worked. What's saying is that which not working. So Rabbi Yeshua highlights that which is past tense. Rabbi Yonasan highlights the working, which is present and future. Right?
So he's saying that Rabbi Yochanan saying that.
Rabbi Yonasan, yeah.
That the asher alone is not enough to make it past tense.
Correct. Correct. To make it past tense, you need the prefix of the nun on the word work to make it past tense. The introduction of asher lo is not enough.
So that would mean that asher lo would not be past tense. It would be what?
Present? So that's the big question. We'll get to that in a second. So Rabbi Yeshua says, well, I understand that it doesn't say neva with the nun, but asher, the word that, l'sha'avar mashma, implicates past tense. But Rabbi Yonasan says, I'm sorry, the word asher is tied up.
It's a whole other issue.
It's tied up in a ribuy. It's tied up in a ribuy. And because it's tied up in a ribuy, it's not there to qualify the next words, which is working. And therefore the working is only futuristic. And the word that which is a ribuy, which the Gemara will explain presently. A ribuy, which literally means addition, is when the Torah has an extra word that didn't have to be there. And if the extra word is there, it didn't have to be there, it's coming to teach you something, either add something to the law or restrict the law. We had this earlier, and the Gemara is going to do a similar exercise. Let's refresh what happened earlier so we know what's about to come. What we had earlier was a description of the fact that the egla rufa was never worked on. The calf was never used for any work.
Right.
And there you had a klal, which was no work. You had a prat, the specification of no yoke pulled on it.
Right.
And you might have made a klalu prat. You might have applied the rule of general followed by a specific, in which case the general is limited to the specific, which would mean only a yoke disqualifies the calf, but not any other work. But because it begins with asher, that which no work, that word that which is extra to tell you, don't limit the words I'm about to tell you. And the Gemara is going to do the same thing here. It says no work. The land was never worked. That's any work. It says don't sow. That's very specific. So maybe I should limit the work to the specific. Comes the word I shared before and says, no, don't limit the word that. Don't limit the word work. If so, where all work is prohibited, why say the word so? Why mention it also? To tell you what kind of work is forbidden. The kind of work that's actually in the ground versus the work that's on the ground. Like we said, you're allowed to prepare flax or cut stone on that land. You just can't do any work in the land. And that's derived from the word so, from so. That's what the Gemara is about to do. Which we're going to read it in the words of the Gemara in a moment. But this, therefore, gives Rabbi Yonasan the permission to separate the words asher from the word lo yu'bad. And therefore the word lo ye'abed, considering that the prefix is a yud with a tzedeh, is therefore future tense, and it's a prohibition rather than a description of its past. And the word asher is tied up to tell me not to limit work to sewing. Quite the
entanglement.
gymnastics. Yeah, so that's where we are. Where I guess what Rabbi would say is, look, it's good that the word asher does that and helps us frame the next words. Well, let's put it this way. Maybe Rabbi says something like this. The word asher lo yubad, asher, how do you pronounce it? Asher lo ye aved, that which not working. So the word that which gives us full qualification of the not working, both in the sense that it's a description of the past and in the sense that you shouldn't limit it, because it gives like a full handle on that word, maybe. And therefore, the fact that it's being used to not limit the klal uprat doesn't disqualify us from telling us that it means past tense. Whereas Rabbi Yonasan says, no, it's tied up to tell me not to limit it to working. And if it's tied up to tell me not to limit the working to sewing, it cannot also be applied to tell me that it means past tense.
Okay, yeah.
Right? Something like that. Whereas Rabbi Yoshia says, no, the word asher gives full description of the words not working, both in the sense that you shouldn't limit the working and in the sense that it means past tense. Maybe that's what the dispute comes down to. If all that, it's like with me. Okay, so now let's see how the Gemara plays out this klal prat, yeah? All right. So now that we know it, it should be easier to flow through it. And we'll conclude with that. So let's see. The Mishnah said, the Gemara does this exercise of the klal prat and the riboy by first introducing the section of the Mishnah which said, after saying you may not work on that spot, the Mishnah said, umutter, it is permitted, lisrek sham piston, to like lisrek means piston means to like to comb flax, right? I think it means to comb. To prepare flax, I'm pretty sure it means comb. Yeah, comb flax, and l'nakar shamavonim, and it's permissible to cut stone. That's what the Mishnah said. The Mishnah didn't explain his background. So again, the Gemara introduces a Mishnaic text to give the background to the Mishnah. Tanu Rabbanan, the sages taught, Asher lo yavid by the lo yizra. The verse said, as we just been discussing, that which no working in it, and that which shall not be sown, and not be sown. Okay. So instead of highlighting the past and present or future, which we just did, the Gemara highlights the fact that it says first no working, and then says no sowing, which seems both redundant, and the second seems limiting to the first, limiting the prohibition to just sowing, whereas the first statement said any work is no good. So how do we make sense of this? Says this Mishnaic text, this Bryce. Ein the elazriya, I cannot say, I only have the prohibition against sowing, shara avodos, other works, minayin, from where do I know that it's prohibited to do other works beyond sowing? Talmud Lemar, the verse comes and teaches, asher le'yavid, that which no working, mikomoka, which is any kind of work. So in Cain, if so, that the verse already tells me no working period, which is a broad statement of any kind of work beyond just sowing. So matam how do you pronounce it? V'lo yezara, right? That's the pronunciation. Lo yezara. So why say no sowing? If you already prohibited any kind of work, why say no sowing?
It's kind of like a klal prat, no?
Look, Gemara's not going to do klal prat, right? But the Gemara's going to ask, why don't we? Let's see.
Right.
It's the same pattern we had before.
Yeah.
Loimar will have to teach you ma'azriya miyuchedes, just as when it comes to sowing, it is uniquely shiba kufa shakarka. It's a unique kind of work that's done in the actual ground, in the body of the earth, in the substance of the earth. So too, kol shiba kufa shakarka, any work that is in the actual body of the ground, of the earth, of the soil, is prohibited, and therefore yotza. We exclude from this prohibition srikas pishton, combing flax, which are doing while sitting on the ground, but not in the actual ground, and cutting stones, which this work is not in the actual soil.
We're not prohibiting this.
Correct. And that we get from the fact that it says not to sow. Had the verse said, don't work, I might have said, any work is prohibited, even to sit there and write a book, or to cut stone, or comb flax. But because the pasuk says sowing, it's telling you, the work I just told you can't do is the kind of work that is similar to sowing, which is done in the actual soil. That's the prohibited work.
That's why you need the word sow.
That's why you need the word sow.
But isn't that the qualifier?
That's the Gemara asks now. So this is the end of the Mishnaic text, and I know this because the next word is Aramaic. Here we go. So the Gemara now challenges your question. The Ema, why don't we say Asher lo yovid boy when the verse says not to work? Klal, that's a general statement. Yeah, no working. The lo yizar don't sow. Prat, that's a specific limiting statement. Klalu prat, when you have in the Torah a general statement followed by a specific limiting statement, ein b'chlal al mashiva prat, then the general statement becomes limited to the limited statement. And therefore we would say, Zriya, sowing in, yes, that is part of the prohibition, but midi achrini, other things, are not part of the prohibition. Answers the Gemara. No, what's the answer? We should know this already. Asher, the word Asher, ribuyahu, is a ribuy. The word Asher is a ribuy. It's the same thing we had before. The word Asher, which is that which is not worked, comes to tell you, don't limit the words that which the work.
Oh.
Even though it's a klal, and then it's followed by a prat, because the klal is preceded by the word asher, and the word asher means that which is not worked. The word that which is not worked is to tell you, hey, that which is not worked, period. Don't limit it by the next word, which is the sowing. So why is the sowing there? To tell you that the work is only the kind of work that's in the ground.
Unless the reboy is not really a reboy.
It is a reboy.
That's not disputable.
It's not disputable. Because, why is that? Here's the thinking. Because the work is definitely futuristic. Because we have lo yizar, don't work. So if you have asher, it's extra. That which.
Yeah.
And therefore it tells us don't limit the work. And Rabbi Yoshia will add, it also means to tell you a description that it never was worked also. This is the Gemara that I'm going to tell you something that I think is interesting we could think about that I haven't got clear, but yeah.
Can I go back?
Yeah.
So if it's not a klal prat,
yeah,
how are we able to limit it to only work that's in the ground?
Beautiful. That was my question.
Oh.
And I'll tell you why it's my question. Because the same exercise, yeah, you follow so far?
I didn't understand Yeshua's last point.
But before that, you understood the Gemara's.
Yes.
Okay, so let's explain Yeshua's question.
Please.
And add to that,
okay.
Which is like this. The last time we had this exercise, what did the Gemara say? The Gemara said like this. The Torah says, no work, maybe any work disqualifies the calf. Then it said, pulling a yoke disqualifies the calf. That's also kala prat. So he said, hey, don't limit it, because it says asher. Right? And asher means don't limit the words and don't limit the kind of work that disqualifies the calf. If so, why single out yoke? Right? What did the Gemara answer? To teach you a unique law about yoke. That yoke is disqualifying even when it's not at the time of work. Whereas other work is only disqualified when it's at the time of work.
Right.
So in that case, what did the yoke do? It didn't limit the klal.
No.
It just gave it its own unique feature.
Because of asher?
Because it's there. The word asher said, don't limit the kind of work that disqualifies.
Right.
As for the fact that yoke is singled out, it's coming to tell you a unique law about yoke. Not to impose anything on the klal, whereas here it doesn't impose something on the klal. It tells you that the klal should be limited to something similar to the sowing, which is your question. Why are we limiting? If it's no klal prat, why are we limiting? Yeah, that's the question.
Yeah.
So my answer, this is my thinking. Haven't read this anywhere yet.
Oh, it's not in there. It's not in the.
No, the Gemara doesn't say it, and I haven't read it in any commentaries. I'm sure some commentaries do discuss it, but this is my thinking. By the yoke question, it actually is limiting. It actually is limiting the klal. How so? In an awkward kind of way, but it is limiting, and that's why I'm not 100% sure, and I'll tell you where I'm not sure, but let me just first say what I think, and then I'll tell you why I'm not sure about it. We can argue that the yoke actually is limiting to the klal. How so? Let's imagine the verse didn't have the prat. Let's just imagine the verse didn't say, and it wasn't pulled by a yoke. And all it said was, that which no work was done with it. That's all it said. What would I say? any work disqualifies. Doesn't matter if it's during the time of work or not during the time of work.
It's a cloud.
Because it's a cloud. Any work is done. But by singling out yoke, giving it a unique law, it de facto limits the rest of it. Because otherwise it's not unique.
Wait, say that again, sorry.
You follow that? Had the Torah not said that which wasn't pulled by a yoke, and all it said was a calf that no work was done with it, what would I conclude? Any work is make a difference what time you do it. During a time of work, not time of work.
No.
Any work disqualifies the calf, yeah? Now comes the Torah and says, which was not pulled by a yoke. So I have to give it a unique law.
Only at the time of work.
Only where, 1 second, I'm giving the yoke a unique law that even when it's not a time of work.
No. For
So
sure,
de facto, I'm limiting everything else to be only at the time of work.
Yes.
So it is limiting.
Yeah.
So it's not as if the klal prat there isn't limiting, but the klal prat here is limiting. In both cases, are limiting. But because they're preceded by asher, it's not limiting completely. So there is a similarity here.
A limitation.
Exactly.
It's not complete. Or to its fullest extent.
Exactly. If it were just a klal prat, it would be completely limiting to the prat. But because the klal prat is precipitated by a riboy of asher, it says, hey, listen to that prat, but not all the way.
That's a different analysis than what we did earlier.
That's correct. Which means really the klal prat not being discounted. It's not completely being discounted.
No, it's just not in its
full. It's not in its full capacity because it's a riboy. That's correct. In both cases. Here, we are limiting the klal to things that are similar to the sowing, that it's in the actual soil. And in the case of the yoke, we are limiting it to say, well, the work that disqualifies the calf is only if it's at the time of work.
When it's not a yoke.
It's not a yoke. But there still is a difference between the way the Gemara does the limitation here versus the limitation there. Because over here, where the Gemara had the limitation go, we limited the klal to be similar to the prat. But in the case over there, we actually limited the klal to be distinct from the prat. Right?
This one's
so it's not
more of a complete klal.
Here it's correct. Because here at least we're limiting the klal to be similar to the prat. We're taking a detail of the prat and applying it to the klal. So to some extent, we're doing klal prat, just not all the way. Fine. But in the other one, we're actually making the prat distinct, and in that way limiting the klal. But we're not actually limiting the klal to the prat. We're limiting it to be distinct from the klal, from the prat. That's why I'm not 100% sure about my reading, because doesn't perfectly align. So I have to look at the words of the verses and see if, like, somehow in the words of the verses themselves it implies here limited to be similar, here limited to not be similar. But I don't see it, because in both cases it says ba or boy in it. In both cases it has that. In both cases it has asher loy in the beginning. It's very, very similar patterns, almost exactly to the best of my reading.
But the
outcomes are different. In here, we're doing a klal prat. We're limiting the klal to the prat, but not completely because of the word asher. But in the other case, we're limiting the klal to allow the prat to have a unique feature. But actually, they're not similar.
That seems like a more stronger case for the riboy.
In the other one, yes. So in the other one, we're highlighting the riboy, and here we're highlighting the klal prat.
Yeah.
So again, I'm sure the commentators discussed this, but this is my thinking.
Actually outright said that a klal prat doesn't work. Did they?
No, you see, that's the funny thing. All the Gemara says is asher is a riboy. Doesn't explain how it's a riboy, what it does. Neither does Rashi. Rashi doesn't even offer, okay, because it's a riboy, therefore read the verse in such a fashion. It just says it's a riboy.
Maybe
and because it's a riboy, don't limit the klal.
Can you have a riboy and still have a klal prat together?
That's unclear. That's lack of clarity. From the Gemara today, it would seem yes.
There is a riboy, you still use the klal prat.
That would be from today's Gemara.
It's not necessarily a negation of a klal prat just because you have a riboy.
That's what you conclude today. That's what you conclude today. Because the klal is actually being limited to the prat, but not completely. Whereas from the Gemara about the yoke, we would conclude, hey,
not so bad.
There's no klal prat, and there's just a unique law here and a unique law here.
Yeah.
Even though that unique law ends up limiting the klal, but it's not as if we're limiting the klal to the prat. We're limiting them distinct from the prat. That here it's only disqualified when it's at the time of work, and here it's disqualified even if it's not at the time of work.
I think more latitude was given for the riboy in the earlier case.
Yes, and it's almost like it's peculiar that Rashi does not comment to explain how the riboy plays out.
Yeah.
Doesn't explain it, which is, to me, is unique. Rashi over here does say a few words, but not enough.
Really.
Actually, no, actually it says, I'll tell you this. Actually does say something which might undermine what I'm saying, actually, like this. So Rashi doesn't comment on the Gemara that we just read, that Asher is a riboy. He comments on Rabbi Yonasan, who earlier said not to take the word Asher and turn it into past tense. Why? Because Asher is being used as a riboy, right? And therefore don't use it as a description of past tense. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Rabbi Yonasan Rabbi Yoshia would somehow say both. Okay, so says Rashi, Ribuyo, loiba, the word Asher only ka, loiba ella, a double negative. It doesn't come only, meaning it's the word Asher is being used exclusively. L'rabbis, to add kol avodos, any work beyond yoke, beyond sewing. Gid l'kamon, as the Gemara shall presently explain. Then Rashi adds four words. Deloy tidrishe kaluprat, so that you shall not apply the rule of kaluprat.
You shall not.
He doesn't just say it's a riboy that adds other work. He adds the words in afterwards, so that you shall not apply the standard of kaluprat.
Really?
So my reading is back to square one. That's all Rashi offers.
How are we able to limit this without the kaluprat?
Good question. Yep, because Rashi could have actually not said those words at all. He could have said, it's going to become, in the Gemara is about to explain how Asher is a riboy to add other work. That's all. But he adds four words. That you should not apply the standard of kaluprat. Maybe Rashi's telling us that so that we don't come to the issue that we just came with, which is it's different than the way it was by yoke. Because we're not applying kaluprat. And if you're not applying kaluprat, all bets are off. Maybe that's what Rashi's telling us. I don't know. It's certainly unclear. And anyway, just sharing with you my thinking. If we were in yeshiva now, we'd spend the next 3 hours opening up all the sources and comparing it and digging down to what exactly kaluprat is, how it works, and comparing it to other places in Gemara where the Gemara brings kaluprat and brings a riboy. But we stick into a half an hour what we can. Okay, wonderful day and a good Ner Shabbos.